Hello everybody, this is Glasspeed. In the last video, we reviewed what Model Context Protocol is, why it would be useful to write an MCP client for your Gen AI application, as well as some of the reasoning behind why I'm doing the project in the first place. So in this video, we're going to start working through the actual MCP Hub class in my implementation. And I'm going to divide this into multiple parts. So in this video, we're going to go over why we're using the design pattern that we're using, and we're going to go over the initialize function. So before we start reviewing any code, I've seen these files in the different clients called a number of things. Index.ts seems to appear a lot. I actually like the idea of using MCP Hub as a convention for naming, and my reasoning is that it's descriptive, it's accurate, it gets across what exactly this is. So let me get into that a little bit. So I've got a little Google Doc I'm just gonna spell out over here. So what we're defining in the MCP Hub class can be broken down into a series of parts. We got one, we have interfaces at the top of the file. Two, we have our main MCP Hub class. And three, at the end of the file, we export a singleton instance of the class. So let me go into the hub here. And so we've got our imports up here at the top. We have some interfaces here. And the reason why we're defining these here is so that we can strongly type everything as we go forward and validate against what we're expecting. We've got our wider class here, and we're going to be going through this in depth, obviously, over the next few videos. We've got a bunch of stuff. And then down here at the bottom, we've got our singleton instance that we're exporting. So this is why we call this a quote-unquote hub. We're going to manage all of our MCP server connections from this one instance. And our application is always going to talk to the MCP servers via this instance. So this is going to let us maintain all of our MCP related config, all of our MCP related state, all of that in one place. So to use the MCP as USB-C analogy from before, you can think about the singleton instance of the MCP hub as, so if these servers are USB sticks, then this hub is going to be that part of our computer that we're plugging all of this into. So I want to walk through a little bit as far as the methods that we have on this class. And I've actually prepared these. Let me just copy paste these over here to our doc. Whoops. So methods we have available in the MCP Hub class. Well, there we go. All right, so let me separate these out a little bit. Okay, so we've basically got 6 sections here as far as where our methods are going to be falling into. We've got our constructor get instance pattern, because this is singleton. We have our initialization. We've got some methods here: connect server, disconnect server, reconnect server, for managing server connections. We have our tool and resource operations, which is going to be how we call one of these tools, and then some other tools for like listing what we have available to us. We've got our connection status and info methods, which is just list connections, get connection, which is basically going to let us retrieve a specific connection or list the connections that we have available to us from our config file. And then finally down here, just some event handling for what happens if we, I think the on status change might be implementation specific. And then we have actually no. So these are both to broadcast status changes to the listeners that we have. So my bad on that. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in to just what we have here at the top, and we're going to be going through the initialize method. Love that jug of water, man. All right, so we've got our class here, and we've got a few private properties that we've got declared up here at the top. So we've got connections, and this is going to be a map of that string is going to be the name of the server we're connecting to, and then the MCP connection is going to have the state properties of that connection. So when I'm talking about state properties, we got a few things listed up here. I'll go into this more in depth a little bit later, but the basic idea that can illustrate the point is we have a status here for whether we're connected, we're trying to connect, or we have disconnected from that server. And that's where we're going to keep up with that here in the class. We have our status listeners, which are going to be again, helping us keep up with any changes that might occur in the state of our connection. We got a Boolean for whether this is initialized or not. We've got our config, which is going to be of the type MCP config, which we've got defined up here. And to make this a little bit more concrete as far as what this MCP server config is. So this is our Srcbook MCP config.json file is what I'm calling it. I actually got this from, let me go over here. Yeah, so if you go to if you got this configured in Claude Desktop and you want to add MCP servers and capabilities to what Claude can do, it has this Claude Desktop JSON or Claude, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's up there. Claude Desktop config.json. And it's going to follow this format where you've got your MCP servers object, and that's going to be a nested object with your different servers and some properties. And what they're going to have are within the config are going to be called command. So whether you're using Python or JavaScript, TypeScript, just the executable command you're going to use, in our case npx, and some args, which is almost always going to include this Y flag, which is just if the server prompts you when you're connecting to it to like, hey, which do you want yes or no on these different options, to just say yes to everything so you don't have to interact, and then the name of the server, maybe a few other things. So that's what we have here. And I've loaded this up with a few different things. I'll probably have trimmed this down by the time we get to actually implementing something. But I do all that to illustrate what this MCP server's record looks like. So you're going to have a string, name of the server, MCP server config, whatever piece of that config file is associated with that server. And then we've got our instance here, which is of type MCP Hub. So standard singleton instance implementation, you've got a private constructor here, and that's to prevent from outside the class using, let's say const hub equals new. I probably can illustrate that. I think we've got that. Here, let me just import. Let's go MCP Hub. And tell you what, just for the sake of argument. So now, if I try to say const hub equals new MCP Hub, see, it's auto-correcting that for me, but let's just go new MCP Hub. You're not going to be able to do that. And we do that to keep from instantiating multiple versions of this because it is a singleton. So let me correct that back to what it was before. But you did see before that we've got this getInstance method. And what this is going to do is that you can get like a specific reference to the singleton instance itself. And then that's how you're going to, I didn't phrase that right, but that's how you're going to build this thing down at the end of the file. You can see Claude gave me that little Claude green check mark that it likes. All right, so back up here to the top. So that's how we're going to create it down at the bottom. And we have this initialize function. So when we're initializing, we're going to return this promise, promise void, which just means that we're returning a promise that's going to resolve when the task is done or the process is done. And we're going to connect all the configured servers. And we're going to do that here via the load MCP config function. So I'm going to try as hard as I can to stay out of the implementation details at this point just to avoid bloat. I'm actually going to punt the ball over to you, the viewer, if you want to look at the actual types and such that I'm referencing going forward. But the gist is that if we go over here, so give me a second to pull this up. So, all right. So what's important here is we've got this config path. All this means up here at the top, and it's related to Srcbook is that if we're running in a container, then it's going to be in the app directory, which is the work dir here in Srcbook's Docker file. And if not, then we're going to have this distdir variable, and really all that means is that it's going to be here in our API package there at the root. So when we're loading the MCP config, basically what we're doing here is we've got a pointer that's going over here, and it's just going to take in what we've got configured. Might go into this a little bit more like in depth later, but effectively that's what we're doing. And then let's see if there just isn't anything there, then we're gonna go ahead and set initialize to true and just say, hey, we don't have any servers configured. We're gonna throw a warning right there. So we've got our hub initialized, and we've got a little bit of just kind of error handling here. This actually does seem like a pretty good time to go back here and explain what I'm doing with the load MCP config. So it's going to attempt to read the config from the file system. So if it's successful, it's going to parse it into JSON. Which is easy enough to do since, JSON, sorry about that. And effectively, we're just going to be checking for formatting errors since it's already going to be JSON. The parsed JSON is going to be validated against a predefined schema, which is MCP file config schema, which that is actually... So we've got a bunch of these schemas defined here, and this is actually what I was getting at with the punting it over to you if you wanted to go through and look at these. But basically, we've got all of our core MCP schemas just defined here within a subdirectory here in the MCP folder called index.mts. And we're just kind of using this to store all the schemas that we want to go and validate against later. So we're ensuring that that's conforming to the expected structure. If the file, if it's missing, if it's not accessible, if it fails validation, then the function is going to fetch the configuration data from the database using git config. And the retrieved database data is validated against schema. If it's valid, it's going to update the cache configuration and optionally write it to a file for future use. The function is going to log some errors for debugging, and it handles scenarios like missing files, permissions issues, schema validations, failures. And finally, it's going to return the validated configuration either from the cache, the file, or the database. So, having walked through that, we've got our hub initialized. And I've already gone through the Srcbook MCP config JSON file for my notes here. So, and just as a final note on this, the ones that I have configured here, I actually specifically chose because they don't require an API key. So I didn't have to worry about anything like, walking through some tutorial on how to get a personal access token or something. So all of these work out of the box. There's a few others like that. They're on the Model Context Protocol servers repo. So that gets us through the initialization. So in the next video, we're going to be working on going through the functions for managing server connections, which, as a refresher, are connect server, disconnect server, and reconnect server. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video.